Hey guys, the Ian interview is going to start in a second. Just wanted to let you know that there have been some audio hiccups that Marcelian right there is just working on fixing them up for you. It's not a big deal, but you might notice them throughout the video. We do our best to fix them for you. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, finally it happened. We have Ion Hazzikostas here, game director for WoW. I think everybody knows Ian at this point. We have some good, crazy questions for Ian. Hopefully we get through all of them on time. Hi Ian.
Hi.
Always a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, the War Within is upon us. It's kind of a crazy time, so we'll just get right into it, not waste any time whatsoever.
Sounds great.
Kick it off.
I was going to start with one of the biggest systems that you guys did with Warbands, which have been incredible. And I know it's most likely an ongoing project, and you probably have a lot of plans, maybe some plans you can talk and not talk about, but I was really curious, something a little bit akin to the kind of content that we do. And when it comes to currencies like the Crests and stuff, and I know that you guys introduced some discounts for alts when it comes to alts, we end up a lot of the time with our mains done with all the content, all the upgrades, with a lot of Crests that we cannot do, and we're thinking if there's any plans to use Warbands or that similar system to give currency even with tax to alts and stuff like that.
That's an interesting idea. I think, no specific plan along those lines right now, but I think that's the sort of thing that Warbands creates the potential for. Really, like Warbands is not just a single point in time. It's a foundation for the future of World of Warcraft. I think it's, as we approach our 20th anniversary, it's replacing the old framework that was so tied to individual characters and everything was on a character level. And that's why, for years, when we would get feedback about things that weren't alt-friendly enough, asking for more things to be account-wide, it was very challenging technically because the system was never built with that in mind. Warbands are really rebuilding all of that to create a new foundation. And so what you've seen, initially, this is just the beginning.
It's looking great already.
Looking great already. If it's just the beginning, then we should expect greater things. Now, there's a stigma around the community, like when it comes to like tuning for classes, right? Now, I know it's kind of a spicy subject, but we'll see, how it flows. So there's this thing like when you think about race to world first, NDI competitions, all of that. How much is the team taking into account those specific game styles when it comes to balance? Because there's always this about this 1% situation, right? So
So I think, you initially framed it in terms of class tuning. I think there's two different aspects of it. There's class tuning and there's content tuning. Content tuning, I think, really, for the most part, isn't taking into account or focused on that very cutting edge, the very, very top players. We're designing Mythic Plus dungeons and we're balancing them for the hundreds of thousands of people who do Mythic Plus dungeons. And then there's this open-ended progression system that will let the very best, prove themselves at the top. For raiding, I will say that during the first week or two on Mythic, we do tune the very last couple of bosses in the raid with the world first guilds in mind, because they're the only guilds in the world that are going to be seeing those bosses at that time. It doesn't matter that Farak is nearly impossible for most cutting-edge guilds, because those cutting-edge guilds are still working on, boss 3, boss 4. By the time they get to Farak, Farak will be easier. And so we wouldn't really be doing anyone a service if we tuned Farak for cutting-edge guilds when, Liquid and Echo and Method are getting there. Now, when it comes to class tuning, I think the community, we are listening to lots of community feedback, and it's kind of a back and forth discourse with the community. The community looks to, Sims, and they look to like 95th plus percentile parses for what classes are capable of. No one is looking at the 50th percentile, right? And so like it doesn't, if a class, maybe a spec is performing better for the average player but falls behind for top performers, everyone is going to view that spec and tell us that spec needs buffs, that spec is underpowered. And so, of course, we have to pay attention to it. For the overwhelming majority of players, like even the very best in the world, there is more that could be done with better choices, better execution, more skill. right? And so for the average player, playing the spec that you know well, that you feel comfortable playing, where you really, understand the rotation, you can do it without thinking about it too much, is going to yield better results than switching to the build that you read is supposed to be the best, but you don't know it well enough to execute it that way. So that said, though, yes, I think we have to look at the same data the community is looking at. Otherwise, there would be a disconnect, and the community would just think that we're bad at balancing the game because we need to use the same definitions of what balance means.
True. And it was felt, through what we've seen as well, the balance between classes has been getting tremendously better with every patch, everything, and the amount of work that you guys have put in is very, the amount of patch notes that we're getting is unprecedented.
I appreciate that. The reality is there's always going to be a spec that's at the bottom of that list. It doesn't matter if it's 8%, 5%, 3%, someone will be at the bottom. There'll be someone at the top. And, the other factor in this is perceptions of the meta actually drive the meta to some extent. One of my favorite personal anecdotes that taught me some valuable lessons about balance. When I was a class designer, 13, 14 years ago at this point, I was working on Death Knight as one of the classes.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, you have me to blame for blood tanking in its original formation. Active mitigation, and anyway. I forget which way it was, but I'm pretty sure their general perception was, between the DPS specs at the time during Kata, I think it was Unholy Death Knights were telling us that they were terrible and everyone was playing Frost. And Frost was indeed doing better than Unholy at that time. So then we buff Unholy by 5% or so. We don't touch Frost at all. And the community, thinks about this and they're like, okay, Unholy's better now. Sure. Fast forward, 3 weeks, we're looking at logs, we're looking at data. Frost dropped by several percent. We didn't touch Frost. But what happened was the best players, the ones who min-maxed the most, switched specs.
True. Yeah.
And so the performance, if you looked at the damage graph over time, it would look like we nerfed the spec. Yeah. We didn't nerf the spec. What happened was the best players decided to play a different spec. And so in that sense, it's a moving target. There's no way we're ever going to get it perfect. Oh, yeah. But what we try to do is hopefully be reactive and frequent enough in our balance changes that we can reassure players that if it seems like you're on the bottom today, don't worry, you're not going to stay there forever. Help is on the way.
Definitely something that we felt. Also, wanted to ask, since we're on the topic of rating, it's kind of a little bit more open-ended question with some examples, but feel free to disregard the examples. Sure. In terms of Mythic Plus has gone leaps and bounds in terms of design from the beginning of let's say end of Shadowlands to where it is now, and the fact that you guys changed the affix pool twice in what was it, less than a month, that was incredible. So obviously you guys really care about it, and it was a lot of feedback that probably pushed it as well. And I was wondering if there's any plans on doing similar stuff for rating with some of the I don't really want to say outdated, but the walkbacks to the raids, the wipes that have a lot of downtime when it comes to pushing a boss, and there's a lot of stuff that feels like it maybe made a lot of sense for older raids, but right now when we're progressing Smolder on, and it feels like we're losing more time trying to get back to the fight. Yeah,
that's something that we've talked about. Definitely, I think we want to do a better job of adding more consistency and formalizing the idea of checkpoints. As opposed to just they seem arbitrary, they're invisible, you don't know. Sometimes in Mythic Plus, you have to ask, is it safe to release right now? Or am I going to, you shouldn't have to ask those questions. There should be a more consistent framework. That's not quite ready for us to roll out yet, but it's something that we're talking about and we want to do better where.
That's great. That's great.
Really crazy question.
Sure.
6-player Mythic Plus ever discussed?
It wouldn't just be Mythic Plus. The idea of 6-player groups
content
has been discussed at times. Some of it is just looking at the ratio of tanks to healers to DPS and saying, you know what, there'd be more players that we could fit in if we did this. I think the challenges there are it would be a huge change to the overall feel of the content, to, both, existing social groups that have been running dungeons with 5 players and feel like that's how they play the game. Now suddenly you'd need to find someone else consistently to do that. But it's also like, that is one of the things that's just always been what a WoW dungeon is. And, just even little things like how much space we give you to spread out, how we lay out the dungeons. We'd have to rethink a surprising number of things, I think, to make it a really good experience. So it's not to say that the idea is completely dead, but it's something that every time we've considered it has felt a little bit too scary to make as a game-wide change. And so instead we pursue other approaches.
Got it. Because it would be like the whole rework of everything, like the dungeon layout, the mechanics, all that.
Yeah, and I think and it wouldn't be. I mean, it wouldn't be for Mythic Plus really alone. It would be like game wide, like this, changing the size of a party, changing the user interface, changing like for across the whole game. Because again, you wouldn't want a 6-player raid in Mythic Plus where you have like a 5-player party and one person separately. Like we would need to rethink all of that, right? So it may be something that does make sense at some point, but not something we're doing right now.
Building on that question with augmentation kind of revolutionizing the role distribution or the player distribution within a party, and sometimes it feels mandatory, but maybe that's for higher end content. I'm not sure if you guys have plans to do more support style classes. People have been, talking about, priest could use one, or this class could use one. I don't know if augmentation is going to be the only one or if there's more, but if there are, or there will be plans to add more, would this affect 6-player Mythic Plus is one example, but would this affect the type of group distribution, like you said, the ratio of tanks, healers, and DPS within the content?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have any plans to add new support specs right now, but we're definitely open to it. And if we, look at adding a new class or adding new specializations to existing classes, I think the idea of something that's AUG style is something we would consider. I don't think that we would call it a brand new role, though. I think we still call augmentation DPS. They're treated that way for composition purposes, for queuing. And really, the inspiration there is trying to recreate a bit of the playstyle that existed like 18 years ago. If you think back to Burning Crusade and like Shadow Priests or Enhancement Shaman, where like you were valuable to your group. You really wanted a Shadow Priest in every raid because they were providing mana, they were debuffing the boss. Their job wasn't to top meters, but they were adding to the group's damage, and that felt valuable for certain players who other players didn't want to do that. They wanted to be the one topping meters. And so we think that there should be a place for that mentality and that type of play style in modern World of Warcraft. I think we'll see how that continues to evolve as we make class decisions going forward.
I want to get a little bit into the hero talents.
Sure.
So for the most part, I feel like hero talents were quite a success, and we've seen a lot of changes throughout the alpha and beta and message announcement, so it's obviously being iterated on constantly. Now, there's a couple of specs that could probably use some more love, and I'm not going to name any examples here, but are you guys considering going for revamps in future patches of Dragonflight, like actual revamps for the hero talents, right?
Anything is possible. I would say that it's unlikely that we do like a complete revamp in the sense of like reimagining 4 aspects of an existing tree, because at that point there'll be players who've been playing with that as their identity, as their rotation for months, and if a patch drops and suddenly fundamental aspects of your class are different, that's probably too much change for a patch. That's the sort of change we would make in an expansion. It's certainly possible that in future expansions we might overhaul or change or modify the hero talent system significantly. But we're definitely going to keep tuning and iterating. I think we made a point of having as many of the hero talents as we could playable early on in beta, so that we could spend the entire beta cycle really iterating on them, responding to feedback. But of course, at some point, we have to say, okay, we're going to stop, we're going to tune, we have to ship the game. We can't keep iterating forever, but that will continue through patches, right? And I think as we start to see which hero talent trees are more popular or less popular, as we get feedback from a broader base of players using them in all the contents in the live game, that will inform future changes.
Great to hear. Great to hear.
Kind of addressing the hero talents as well, it's a little bit of brand question, but as people who get engaged with a lot of the specs, we're kind of grateful that the tier sets that we have in the first season are a little bit more simple because we want to explore. And I guess that probably was the intention of keeping them a little bit more simple. So we have the freedom to explore the hero talents, and I feel like we're strapped to one particular thing. If you guys have anything planned so far or any ideas on the table with future tier sets, do you think they would prioritize a particular hero talent more, or maybe just pure talent focused and still leave the freedom for people to choose between hero talent A and hero talent B?
That's a very good question. I mean, that's something that I think I would need to discuss, that the combat team would need to discuss as they craft set bonuses. You know, sometimes we do want to nudge players in one direction or another when it comes to making a tier set. If there's a talent that's less popular, a tier set that suddenly makes that the better choice for a few months can be interesting for variety. I think that pushing players to one hero talent tree, though, definitively would feel too constricting, because that's like a very large decision, and we don't want to make it feel like, oh, if you really like these hero talents, you shouldn't play this at all for the next few months.
Well, sticking on the hero talents here, but looking a little bit further ahead. So at some point, that whole interface with hero talents is going to get filled up. Now, what are your guys' thought process on this? And I don't want to mention borrowed power. Because we all know borrowed power is also like the trinket you get.
Yes, items are the original borrowed power.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to go there. But at some point, that whole interface is going to get filled up. Like, what is the philosophy here? Are you guys going to go even further with them? Yeah. Or is it something that, okay, maybe at some point we will get some sort of extra mechanics similar to maybe, I don't know, Legion, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's hard to say what the far-off future holds, but I think when we redid the talent system in Dragonflight, when we thought about hero talents for War Within, we were thinking about managing progression, new levels, without excessive complexity. Like, actually, I think that adding hero talents, where fundamentally you're making one big choice between this pool of things or that pool of things, is less complexity than just adding 10 points to the Dragonflight trees would have been, and all of those extra options. So I think as we look forward, we can add a few points to class or spec trees. We can add a few points to hero talent trees. We can also add entirely new hero talent trees as horizontal progression to choose among. I think we're probably going to do some combination of those over the course of the World Soul Saga ahead. Now, in the far-off future, I mean, honestly, I think it's more likely than not that at some point in WoW's future, we're going to do another level squish, and we'll figure things out. But that's many years off. I think right now we want to focus on giving players exciting new things to look forward to. But we know that at some point, the numbers are going to get a bit too big. The sheer number of options will get overwhelming, and we'll have to consolidate into something that keeps the flavor and the interesting choices, and maybe makes it more focused and elegant.
A little bit of an off-brand question in terms of endgame as well, and it's only coming because we're a little bit of fans of PvP as well. Are there any plans, or is it possible that we can see PvP as a form of endgame content elevate to something similar to where Mythic Plus and rating is kind of like a pillar? I mean, it's definitely a pillar as well for a lot of people, and a lot of people still enjoy. I'm not sure if it was a good example, but at the beginning of Shadowlands, there was a big influx of people doing PvP, probably because the gear was probably better. I'm not saying that incentive.
Yes, but yes. If you put good enough rewards on something, people will do anything.
That's
true. Something we've learned.
I don't know if that's what we want ideally, because maybe that's not the best way to incentivize people to play PvP. I don't know if rewards are the issue keeping people away from PvP, or maybe it's a little bit too challenging or scary. But is there something that you guys have planned for PvP to kind of evolve, like how Mythic Plus evolves, to go to the next level?
It's something that I would hope that we'd be able to accomplish. I'm really excited about Battleground Blitz as a new rated format. I think we added a new Battleground in War Within. We want to do more of that. It's maybe a controversial statement, but I think that Battlegrounds are the sphere of PvP that have the most potential for growth.
We agree.
Okay, so I think Arena is great, but Arena it's less approachable.
Yes.
Right? If you are getting into PvP for the first time, you are jumping in against people who may have been playing for years, and your experience can just be like, well, I might as well take my hands off my keyboard. I did 2 things, and then I got stunned and died. And that doesn't make you want to come back. It doesn't give you those moments of success. Whereas I think in Battlegrounds, being able to play the objective, support your teammates, if you die, it's okay, you respawn, you get another chance. that is in general, I think, something that was where WoW PvP began 20 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And I'd love to see if we can, continue to deepen rewards and the, systems around it to kind of regrow that scene.
It's when we started with PvP as well, and it was a gateway. It was a pillar of what WoW was about, the Horvus Alliance, the dynamic and stuff. And I feel like kind of missing it a little bit, but everything that you've done, like with PvP scene, has been way better with the huge expansion, and it's been going through some journeys of its own.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking about incentives in PvP back in Shadowlands, I want to get into a little bit of the gearing system, right? So you guys made a big improvement in Dragonfight with the crests and upgrading all of that, right? One, I would say, point of contention would have been if like a new player would come into the game, or let's say a returning player for who hasn't played for 4 years.
Yeah.
It feels that it is a bit too much. Okay, we understand because we play every day. We're very aware, right?
Yeah.
It feels like, and I don't know why, maybe you can explain it. So it feels sometimes it's like overly complicated.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely get what you're saying. It's something that we grapple with as a team as well. Even I think when we were first announcing the system and trying to write a blog to summarize it and announce it,
I remember.
You look at the blade, you go oh my God, this is so complicated. There's all these different names. But then I think once you actually play it, it's pretty straightforward. For most players, you're not actually seeing and dealing with all of these different things. You have a level of difficulty that you're doing. You're getting a tier of rewards, and it's I go to the vendor, I go to the upgrade NPC, this is what I need to upgrade my item, I get it, I upgrade the item, and simple. But I think it's a testament to, honestly, how complicated, how complex WoW's systems, WoW gearing, and WoW content are. We're not setting out to build a complex system, but we need to build a system that's going to serve all players. That's going to, make everybody at every level, from outdoor world content to high end Mythic Plus, Mythic Raiders, feel incentivized, but also avoid some of the more degenerate loopholes or pitfalls where it's I can farm easy content and use that to level all my gear up, or I can get the best gear in the game without ever doing the hard content. So we need to have these restrictions, these tiers. That's why we can't just say, there's one currency, you can upgrade any item as much as you want, because then, everyone would end up at the same place at the end of the day. Yeah. And there would be no reason to challenge yourself. There would be, no differentiation between those tiers. We're always going to look for more ways. I think there's more we can do in terms of the user interface and how your item tooltips look to try to make it more intuitive, what you're looking at, what the tiers are. You shouldn't have to memorize what is better and what is champion, which is better, how do these fit in. But it's a new, ultimately in the history of WoW, it's a new system, right? It's so integral to the game right now, but a year and a half ago it didn't exist.
Exactly.
So we're going to keep building on it and refining it and hopefully making it more elegant.
In relation to the gear, this is kind of pointing out something that you guys did in BFA, which was really cool in the sense with the salvage system, where it felt like nothing was really ever wasted, since we repurposed the items into crafting professions and things like that. I'm not sure if this is something that you guys talked about in the future for maybe just scrap items for crests or flight or in Valor Stones in this case and things like that. Is there something like this that
I think that's an interesting idea. The reason why we didn't carry scrapping forward after BFA is that we found that it really undermined gathering professions in a lot of ways, because so many people, it didn't matter if you weren't a miner, well, you're scrapping all this gear. It didn't matter if you weren't a skinner, you were, scrapping all this gear, and that made people feel like those professions weren't as valuable. But that said, the baseline idea that just because if you don't need an item to equip, you can turn it into something else that's valuable helps make more of our rewards feel more rewarding. I think something that weirdly was one of the most successful versions of this at the very beginning of WoW was the way enchanting worked. When epics were really rare, Like, to do the best enchants, you needed those void crystals from disenchanting gear, from molten core, from Blackwing Lair. You couldn't get epics any other way. And so there were times when, like, I know my raid group, we were almost happy to see items that no one needed because we could disenchant them and then make an enchant for our main tank or whatever. Like, the more we can find ways to put unneeded items to another use, I think the better rewards overall will feel.
Awesome.
A question related to delves. From what we've seen so far, what we've tested so far, and listened to people, and I know there's been a bunch of other interviews as well, where delves have kind of been really clarified to be a content for people who don't have the time to dedicate to like a full Mythic plus night or to a raid, and it's easier. There's a lower barrier of entry. They're really fun. There's a lot of potential there. I'm not sure exactly how far ahead you've planned to develop them. So far, they've been really cool. We were wondering if there's any way to make it into like an evergreen system, or we were just experimenting with them and War Within?
No, I mean, I think our hope is, we definitely didn't build delves to just be a War Within system. I think our hope is that this is a long-term pillar, you know, for players who are solo, play in small groups, alongside dungeons, raids, and PvP going forward. And that as we build new spaces, they will have delves. Of course, we're going to evolve the system. We need to hear feedback and learn from how it plays out in, you know, a real live environment where players play differently than they do in beta, right? When you're in beta, if you're doing delves, you're just doing it just to check it out versus someone who has progression goals and gear they want to get and a great vault row they want to fill up. But I think, you know, we remain very excited about that and, you know, want to have it as an option for people who otherwise have kind of run out of stuff to do if they're solo players and don't want to do dungeons or raids at a certain point. But also at the high end of the system, I think there are, you know, even for people who are doing Mythic raids or doing Mythic Plus, we have some fun solo challenges for cosmetics at the very high end of the system that I think will be interesting for those players as well.
Awesome. Well, Ian, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being so open and obviously super passionate about the game and knowledgeable. So I hope now everybody knows. Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure chatting, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.